Romania is a committed and a highly valued NATO ally, and we meet when war is raging on in Ukraine, a neighbor to Romania, so the foreign ministerial meeting will be a very timely and important meeting. What we have seen since President Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine is that President Putin is failing in Ukraine. He is responding with more brutality, attacking gas infrastructure, power lines, and trying to deprive the Ukrainians of water, electricity, light, and heating. Therefore, we need to support Ukraine because what we see is that President Putin is trying to use winter as a weapon of war, which is inflicting a lot of suffering on the Ukrainian people. NATO allies are providing unprecedented support to Ukraine, and they will continue to provide unprecedented support to Ukraine, including by helping them to rebuild their gas and power infrastructure, and of course also continue to deliver air defense systems. We will meet with the Foreign Minister of Ukraine, Kuleba, tonight. We will also meet tomorrow with the foreign ministers of our close partners Georgia, Moldova and Bosnia and Herzegovina, expressing our support to them. And then we will also address our resilience of our critical infrastructure and the challenges that China is posing to our security, to our values, and to our economy. So this will be a very substantive foreign ministerial meeting, and once again, many thanks to Romania for hosting all of us here. It is in this magnificent place.
Secretary General, thanks a lot. You mentioned the fact that Putin is using winter as a weapon of war. But aren't NATO and G7 allies moving too slowly and in too small a scale to help Ukraine rebuild and mend its energy infrastructure that's been damaged by the Russian strikes?
NATO allies and NATO has already delivered critical supplies to Ukraine to help them mitigate the consequences of the brutal attacks against critical infrastructure, including gas and power infrastructure. We have delivered generators, we have delivered spare parts, and allies are in different ways helping to rebuild the destroyed infrastructure. We need to realize that there are enormous effects of the attacks. The Ukrainians are able to shoot down many of the incoming missiles and drones, but not all of them, and therefore these attacks has caused significant damage. I think we all have seen these pictures taken from satellites where you see Europe in light and then you see Ukraine dark, and that reflects the enormous consequences. So there is a huge task to rebuild all of this. One of the important reasons why this meeting today is so important and timely is that this provides us with the platform to mobilize further support, to step up even more, and also for Minister Kuleba to meet all his colleagues in NATO and then to address those urgent needs. And I'm confident that Minister Kuleba will raise also the need for stepping up further when it comes to rebuilding their power infrastructure.
Bloomberg over here.
It's fine, okay. Hello, my name is Corina Matlinski, antenna 3 CNN Romania. How will NATO implement the strategic concept about the Black Sea? We will take decisions. What decisions? What will mean for Romania?
Also, NATO has already made important decisions when it comes to our presence in the eastern part of the alliance, including in Romania and the Black Sea region. After the invasion of Ukraine, we doubled the number of battle groups, including with one here in Romania, led by France. We have increased our presence on the ground. We have more presence in the air. We just conducted a big air defense exercise over Romania with Spanish, Turkish, American jets, but also with French jets flying out of the aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. Fundamentally what we are doing is partly to increase our forward presence, partly we are stepping up pre-positioned, also how much pre-positioned equipment and supplies we have, and then we are increasing the readiness of our forces so they can quickly be sent or reinforce our presence, for instance, in the Black Sea region if needed.
ICTV Ukraine. Can you please,
Veronica Boyko, ICTV Ukraine.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. We can't hear you now, since you've started. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Veronica Boyko, ICTV Ukraine. As you know, Russia is massively bombing Ukrainian critical infrastructure, and 97% of Russian bombs hit Ukrainian civil infrastructure. Millions of Ukrainians are now without power, heating, water, and every day of delayed support causes more suffering. So what practical results can Ukrainians expect for this meeting? Maybe more air defense systems or weapons?
It is painful to see the destruction that the air and missiles attacks by Russia are causing on Ukrainians, on Ukrainian cities, on critical infrastructure. And that's also the reason why allies have stepped up, but also why I expect that here in Bucharest at the foreign ministerial meeting, the message from all allies will be that we need to do more, both to help Ukraine repair the destroyed critical infrastructure, including power and gas grid, but also to, of course, address the attacks itself by providing more air defense systems. This is partly providing more air defense weapons systems, but also, of course, to ensuring that those systems that we have already provided, and many of them are actually modern NATO standard air defense system, including NASAMS and others, that they are functioning, meaning that we need to provide spare parts and we need to provide ammunition. So this is not only about adding more weapons, but also ensuring that the weapons that are already being provided by NATO allies can be used to shoot down incoming Russian missiles and drones.
Secretary General, yesterday you mentioned that we might expect more attacks on critical infrastructure in Ukraine. How many more attacks can we expect, given that Russia's stockpiles are running low?
We can expect more attacks because President Putin is failing. Fundamentally, the fact that they have to give up ground, that Russia has been pushed out of the territories around Kiev, around in the east around Kharkiv, and then in the south that they had to give up Kherson, that's a sign of weakness. That's the sign that Russia is actually failing on the battlefield. In response to that, they are now attacking civilian targets, cities, because they're not able to win territory and to in a way avoid Ukraine slowly liberating more and more territory. So yes, we can expect more attacks. I think no one can say exactly how many, but President Putin and Russia has demonstrated a willingness to inflict suffering and to a level of brutality that we haven't seen in Europe since the Second World War. We know that Russia is running low on ammunition. That's also the reason why they have reached out to, for instance, Iran to try to get more. We are saying very clearly that no country should support Russia's illegal war. And therefore Iran and no other country should provide Russia with missiles, drones or anything else that can help them to continue this brutal war of aggression against Ukraine.
We'll go to German television here, please.
2008, NATO declared here in Bucharest that someday Ukraine would be member of NATO. Where stands NATO now today on behalf of this declaration?
You are right that we made decisions on Ukraine, Georgia, on membership here at the NATO summit in 2008. I was here myself as, at that time, a Norwegian Prime Minister, so I remember that meeting very well. First of all, I welcome that since then we have strengthened significantly our partnership with Georgia and with Ukraine, something that has not least been demonstrated since 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea, and since then NATO allies have delivered a lot of support to Ukraine, and therefore also the Ukrainian armed forces were much stronger, much better equipped, much better led, and much bigger than they were in 2014, and that's very much because of the support they have received from NATO allies over these years, and we were prepared when the invasion happened in February, and then allies stepped up further now with unprecedented level of support to Ukraine. I expect that foreign ministers will, at the meeting here in Bucharest today and tomorrow, reiterate that NATO's door is open. And we have demonstrated that over the last years by allowing North Macedonia, Montenegro to become members, and now also Finland and Sweden. So we have demonstrated that the decision in Bucharest that NATO's door is open is something we live up to, not only in words but also in deeds, by actually allowing more members to come into the alliance. On Ukrainian membership, we stated that Ukraine will become a member. I expect allies to reiterate also that position. However, the main focus now is on supporting Ukraine. We are in the midst of a war, and therefore we should do nothing that can undermine the unity of allies to provide military, humanitarian, financial support to Ukraine, because we must prevent President Putin from winning, and we need to ensure that Ukraine prevails as a sovereign, independent nation.
We'll go to Associated Press over here, please.
Invasion of Ukraine and now faces critical energy issues, including recent blackouts with Russian strikes in Ukraine. Allies talk about supporting Moldova, but what concrete measures can NATO take and is taking to help the country from further destabilization?
Moldova is a partner of NATO. Moldova also receives support from NATO allies individually and from the European Union. And we see the brutality of this war, not only for Ukrainians, but also for people all around the world, caused by increased food prices. But in Moldova in particular, they have suffered also because of the blackouts of their energy grid, which is a direct consequence of the war going on in Ukraine. So this is about stepping up practical support to Ukraine, to Moldova, and also sending a very clear message that this war must not escalate beyond Ukraine. And I had recently a meeting with the Moldovan president, and I expressed my solidarity and also the strong message from many NATO allies that they are ready also to provide the practical support.
Secretary General Pablo Gutierrez with Feature Story News for CGTN. My question is in relation to your statement about winter becoming a weapon for Russia. We have already seen a mass exodus of Ukrainians over the last 10 months. Is there a concern that we will see a second, perhaps a greater wave of migration towards Europe? And what is NATO doing to support the people of the Ukraine in the event of a second wave of Ukrainian migration?
We have seen millions of people being forced to flee Ukraine already. Many of them have crossed the border into Romania, close to 3 million. And that just demonstrates how timely and important it is that we meet here in Romania, border of Ukraine. And of course, we have to be prepared for more refugees crossing into the rest of Europe. This is a war. This is a brutal war. And there is a deliberate attack on critical services. heating, light, water, gas. And of course, the purpose of that is to inflict as much suffering as possible on Ukrainian civilians, to try to break their commitment, their unity in standing up against the Russian invasion. I'm absolutely certain that President Putin will not succeed, that the Ukrainian people, the Ukrainian armed forces, the Ukrainian leadership will not bend, but will just mobilize even more in fighting back. And if anything, these brutal attacks against critical civilian infrastructure is only encouraging NATO allies to do even more, because we need to ensure that Russia doesn't win, because if President Putin wins this war, the message will be that when authoritarian leaders use brutal force, when they invade another country, when they violate international law, they can achieve their goals. That will be a tragedy for Ukraine, but it will also make the whole world more dangerous and us more vulnerable, because the lesson learned for authoritarian leaders is that they can use force. So that's the reason why it is in our security interest to continue to support Ukraine.
Thank you very much, colleagues.